Welcome to Ian Cinema, your destination for endless entertainment and unforgettable movie moments. Discover exciting films, inspiring stories, and cinematic journeys across every genre. Whether you love action, drama, thrillers, or timeless favorites, there's always something waiting for you here. Sit back, enjoy the experience, and let Ian Cinema bring the magic of movies to your screen. Backrooms is a 2026 American science fiction psychological horror film directed and co-scored by Kane Parsons in his feature-length directorial debut. The screenplay was written by Will Sudick. Based on Parsons' popular Backrooms web series, the film expands the eerie universe inspired by the famous Backrooms creepypasta. The story follows Mark Chiwetel Ejiofor, the owner of a struggling furniture store, and his therapist, Renate Reinsve, as they uncover a hidden dimension of seemingly endless liminal spaces beneath the store's basement. The cast also includes Mark Duplass, Finn Bennett, and Lucas Maxwell. After Parsons uploaded his Backrooms web series in January 2022, several film studios expressed interest in adapting it into a feature-length movie. In February 2023, a film adaptation was officially announced, with Parsons confirmed as director. Roberto Patino was originally attached to write the screenplay but was later replaced by Will Sudick. Principal photography began in the summer of 2025 and wrapped in August of the same year. Backrooms premiered at the Aero Theater in Los Angeles on May 7, 2026. Before receiving a theatrical release in the United States through A24 on May 29. The film was met with positive reviews from critics and became a massive commercial success, earning $350 million worldwide. It became A24's highest-grossing film to date and made Kane Parsons the youngest filmmaker to achieve the #1 spot at the U.S. box office. The film also ranks as the 9th highest-grossing movie of 2026 and the 2nd highest-grossing horror film of the year. Plot: in June 1990, Async Research Institute researcher Narn Warren becomes separated from his team and finds himself trapped inside the Backrooms, an endless, maze-like extra-dimensional world filled with dull yellow rooms, flickering fluorescent lights, endless hallways, and strangely distorted furniture. As he desperately tries to call for help, he is hunted and attacked by an unseen entity. Later, Async scientists review the recovered footage of the incident. Years later, Clark, a once promising architect who now owns a failing furniture store, struggles with alcoholism and the collapse of his marriage. He regularly attends therapy sessions with Mary Klein, who is dealing with her own emotional scars from the demolition of her childhood home and the institutionalization of her agoraphobic mother. Hoping to attract more customers, Clark recruits his assistant manager, Kat, and her boyfriend, Bobby, to help film a television commercial featuring him dressed as the store's pirate mascot. While living inside the store to save money, Clark begins noticing strange occurrences, including flickering lights and a malfunctioning television. While inspecting the building's breaker box, he discovers a glowing crack in the wall. Curious, he approaches it and unexpectedly falls into the Backrooms. Inside the mysterious dimension, Clark discovers Narn's abandoned belongings before narrowly escaping an unseen creature and returning to the store. Unknown to him, an Async scientist named Phil observes everything through a surveillance camera. Clark tells Mary about his incredible discovery, but she dismisses his story as a delusion. Determined to prove he is telling the truth, Clark convinces Kat and Bobby to accompany him into the Backrooms with a camera. While exploring a steep, sloping corridor, Bobby is suddenly ambushed and dragged away by an unseen entity. Clark and Kat desperately pursue him, only to become separated after entering an unexplored section of the maze. Lost and alone, Clark wanders through increasingly bizarre and distorted environments before encountering two humanoid creatures that chase him into a dead end. He hears Kat calling his name and sets down the camera to search for her. As Kat screams for him to look behind him, an unknown figure silently picks up the camera. Sometime later, Mary receives a mysterious voicemail from Clark. In the message, he explains that he has chosen to remain inside the back rooms and has no intention of returning. Meanwhile, Phil notices Clark appearing in a television commercial for the furniture store while watching TV with his family. Concerned for Clark's safety, Mary visits the furniture store and enters the back rooms herself. There she encounters a visibly disturbed Clark. As an unseen entity approaches, Clark attempts to calm her before suddenly choking her until she loses consciousness. Plot: Mary wakes up tied to a chair in a room that resembles a dining room. The space is occupied by Clark and three grotesque, motionless human-like figures that silently stare ahead. To demonstrate what they are, Clark stabs one of the figures, revealing that it is made of an edible white substance. He then shocks Mary by showing her cat's severed head stored inside a refrigerator. Clark insists that Mary continue their therapy sessions, but instead of complying, she confronts him. She tells him that his wife left because he refused to accept responsibility for his own failures. As Clark begins to untie her, their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of a towering, twisted version of Clark dressed as the furniture store's pirate mascot. Clark attempts to calm the monstrous pirate, but it suddenly kills him before turning its attention to Mary. She flees through a series of bizarre, ever-changing environments until she reaches a distorted replica of the furniture store. Trapped with nowhere to run, Mary strikes the creature in the face with a chunk of concrete taken from her childhood home. Their violent struggle accidentally triggers an async gas trap, alerting a team of researchers wearing hazmat suits. The creature is subdued, and Mary is taken to an async research facility. After recovering, Mary is brought into an interrogation room where she meets Phil. He explains that async originally manufactured magnetic resonance imaging (MRI) machines before discovering the backrooms, which have since become the company's primary area of research. When Phil asks how she entered the backrooms and what she experienced there, Mary describes the place exactly as Clark had. A broken, imperfect copy of reality that feels strangely familiar yet fundamentally wrong. She then asks whether async intends to release her, but Phil only gives a vague response, saying that the decision is beyond his authority. Deep within the backrooms, a sequence of unsettling locations shaped by Mary's memories and personal trauma eventually leads to a distorted imitation of the interrogation room. There, a deformed copy of Mary sits silently, motionless, and eerily lifeless. Cast: Reinsve Chiwetel Ejiofor as Clark, a furniture store owner and unsuccessful architect. Renate Reinsve as Dr. Mary Klein, Clark's therapist. Mark Duplass as Phil, an async scientist and backrooms researcher. Finn Bennett as Robert Bobby Franklin, Kat's boyfriend. Lucetta Maxwell as Catherine Cat Taylor, Clark's employee and Bobby's girlfriend. Georgia as Naren Warren, an async explorer assigned to investigate the backrooms. Robert Bobrovsky as Pirate Clark, a terrifying entity resembling Clark in a pirate costume that inhabits the backrooms. Krista Koznin as Nora Klein, Mary's mother. Production development at just 20 years old. Kane Parsons became the youngest director to have a film reach the #1 spot at the box office with Backrooms. On January 7, 2022, Parsons launched the anthology web series Backrooms on his YouTube channel, Kane Pixels. Inspired by the famous internet creepypasta of the same name, the series quickly went viral and attracted the attention of several major film studios interested in adapting it for the big screen. In February 2023, a feature film adaptation was officially announced as a collaboration between A24, Chernin Entertainment, Atomic Monster, and 21 Laps Entertainment. Parsons signed on to direct the project, marking his feature-length directorial debut, while Roberto Pacino wrote the screenplay. The film was produced by James Wan, Sean Levy, and Osgood Perkins, with A24 and Chernin Entertainment co-financing the production on a budget of under $10 million. For both the film and his original web series, Parsons drew inspiration from the Portal video game franchise, the television series Mr. Robot, 2015-2019, the films Punishment Park, 1971, and 1 Hour Photo, 2002, and the anime Paranoia Agent, 2004. The movie also maintains strict continuity with the events established in his YouTube series. Casting in May 2025, Chiwetel Ejiofor and Kristen Milioti entered negotiations to join the cast. Ejiofor's casting was officially confirmed the following month, while Will Sudik completed the latest version of the screenplay. After Milioti's negotiations fell through, Renate Reinsve was cast as Dr. Mary Klein in June 2025. The following month, Mark Duplass, Finn Bennett, Lukita Maxwell, and Evan Jogia joined the ensemble. Jogia was already a fan of Parsons' original Backrooms series before being cast. Although his role was relatively small, he revealed that he and Parsons spent considerable time discussing the extensive lore and mythology surrounding the Backrooms during production. Designed to create the unsettling liminal environments of the Backrooms, Kane Parsons used the 3D software Blender to design many of the digital spaces. Production designer Danny Vermette then translated those digital concepts into large-scale physical sets. More than 30,000 square feet of Backrooms environments were constructed across 4 sound stages. Vermette compared the complex process of fitting the interconnected sets together to assembling a giant game of Tetris. The production used approximately 37,000 square feet of wallpaper and 29,000 square feet of carpeting, much of it sourced locally in Canada to minimize the impact of U.S. import tariffs. The production team also emphasized vertical architecture throughout the sets, making the environments more physically demanding for the actors to navigate. The maze-like layout became so convincing that some crew members reportedly got lost while filming. The Backrooms were designed to resemble an architectural nightmare, a flawed digital 3D modeling environment filled with rendering errors such as uneven floors, intersecting hallways, misplaced arches, and objects clipping through walls. These imperfections create a constant sense of unease and unreality. The film portrays the Backrooms as a mysterious prison that distorts and transforms anyone who enters it, rather than resembling traditional demons. The creatures inhabiting the space appear as twisted, corrupted memories of the real world, drawing comparisons to the mysterious anomaly featured in Annihilation, 2018. Filming principal photography began on June 30, 2025, in Vancouver, Canada, under the working title Effigy. Filming concluded on August 14, 2025. Music. The film's musical score was composed by Ed Van Bremen and Kane Parsons. The end credits feature the Boards of Canada track The Word Becomes Flesh from their album Inferno. The soundtrack also includes Ulterior Motives, the once famous Lost Wave song, along with B1 All That Follows Is True by The Caretaker, further enhancing the film's haunting and surreal atmosphere. Theatrical release. Backrooms premiered at the Aero Theatre in Santa Monica on May 7, 2026, before receiving its wide theatrical release across the United States through A24 on May 29, 2026. The film was also released in South Korea and Italy on May 27, 2026. An extended edition, titled Backrooms, Everything Must Go Edition, arrived on July 3, 2026. This version includes an additional 15 minutes of footage, offering audiences an expanded look at the film's unsettling world. Home media. The film became available on digital platforms on July 7, 2026. Reception. Box office. As of July 5, 2026, Backrooms had earned $190 million in the United States and Canada and $159 million internationally, bringing its worldwide box office total to an impressive $350 million. When early box office projections were released in May 2026, analysts expected the film to earn around $20 million during its opening weekend. However, growing anticipation led those estimates to rise to $50 million just before release. The film exceeded expectations by earning $38.4 million on its opening day alone. It went on to debut with $81.5 million domestically and $118 million worldwide, setting a new record for the biggest opening weekend in A24's history. Although the film experienced a 70% drop in its second weekend, it still collected $26.3 million, pushing its worldwide earnings to $213 million and making it A24's highest-grossing film ever, surpassing Marty Supreme, 2025. By its fourth weekend, Backrooms added $7.3 million from domestic theaters and $8.5 million from international markets, increasing its global total to $301 million. The film also marked a major milestone for director Kane Parsons, who became the youngest filmmaker at the time to direct a movie that reached the #1 position at the box office. He broke the previous record held by Josh Trank, whose Chronicle, 2012, opened to $22 million. Trank had previously surpassed Steven Spielberg's record set by Jaws, 1975, making Parsons the newest holder of this achievement. Critical response: the performances of Chiwetel Ejiofor as Clark and Renate Reinsve as Mary received widespread praise from critics. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an 87% approval rating based on 289 critic reviews, with an average score of 7.5. The site's critical consensus describes the film as a startlingly assured feature debut from director Kane Parsons. Backrooms bends the liminal spaces that have haunted the internet for years into a horror film that's as mesmerizing as it is terrifying. On Metacritic, the film received a weighted score of 77 out of 100 based on 46 reviews, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audience reactions were more mixed. CinemaScore audiences awarded the film a B, while Post-Track reported a 68% positive rating, with 53% of viewers saying they would definitely recommend it. Writing for the Los Angeles Times, Amy Nicholson described Backrooms as an ambitious feature-length expansion of Parsons' original web series. She praised its haunting visual style and suggested it functions less as a traditional horror film and more like a surreal dream, comparing the experience to stepping inside a moving painting by Salvador Dali. Nicholson also praised the performances of Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renate Reinsve. Dan Bayer of Next Best Picture commended both Reinsve and Ejiofor for delivering emotionally rich performances despite the screenplay's restrained dialogue. He also praised Parsons as a filmmaker with remarkable confidence, highlighting his command of pacing, visual storytelling, and atmosphere. Sonny Bunch of The Bulwark acknowledged that the film occasionally presents its themes too directly, but argued that its emotional honesty, psychological complexity, and striking visual imagination ultimately make it both memorable and highly effective. In Variety, Owen Gleiberman praised Parsons' ability to create fear through atmosphere, unsettling sound design, and eerie imagery instead of relying on traditional jump scares. He compared the film's dreamlike horror to classics such as Eraserhead, 1977, The Shining, 1980, and Skyrim Ring, 2022. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian highlighted the film's oppressive atmosphere, distinctive production design, and unsettling yellow-lit environments. He also noted similarities to Japanese horror as well as television series like Severance and The Rehearsal. Angie Han of The Hollywood Reporter described Backrooms as an immersive and deeply unsettling expansion of its online mythology. She particularly praised Parsons' use of endless maze-like environments, harsh fluorescent lighting, and constant disorientation to sustain tension throughout the film. Beatrice Lose of The New York Times wrote that screenwriter Will Sudik blends themes of drama, the subconscious, and memory while incorporating metaphors about gentrification and the suppression of the past. IGN critic Lex Briscoe called the film a truly terrifying cinematic rabbit hole, praising its intelligent psychological horror and visually captivating production design. Ryan Latanzio of IndieWire applauded Parsons and production designer Danny Vermette for creating uniquely unsettling spaces unlike anything previously seen on the big screen. Industry observers also viewed Backrooms as a milestone for digital creators entering mainstream filmmaking. The Hollywood Reporter writers Mia Glippo and Darren Couch pointed to the success of Backrooms and Curry Barker's obsession as evidence that YouTube creators are becoming an increasingly important source of talent within the horror genre. They suggested that the strong support from Generation Z audiences could encourage studios to invest more heavily in low-budget, creator-driven projects. In a separate report, The Hollywood Reporter's Alex Warpin noted that the film's success has encouraged agents, studios, and executives to look toward Reddit as a valuable source of original intellectual property, emerging talent, and story ideas. Industry leaders believe that engaging directly with online communities can generate stronger audience interest and build lasting fan engagement. Joseph Bernstein of the New York Times connected Backrooms to Generation Z's growing anxiety about life in the digital age. He argued that the film's endless maze reflects modern experiences such as COVID-19 lockdowns, algorithm-driven online spaces, and the rapid rise of generative AI, making its horror especially relevant to contemporary audiences. The red quarter spills Clark into a vast storage hall where towering stacks of furniture stretch beneath the ceiling, swallowed by darkness. Sofas, wardrobes, dining tables, and children's beds are once sold in Historist and decayed with age. Low blankets the cushions, while wooden frames twist as if crushed beneath an unseen force. Between the towering piles, endless rows of flickering fluorescent lights cast an eerie glow. At the center of the room, Bobby is tied to a chair with thick black electrical cords wrapped tightly round his chest. Beside him, Kat kneels with a jagged shard of glass, desperately sawing at the bindings. Relief nearly brings Clark to his knees. "How did you get here?" Kat looks up, her face drenched in sweat. "The wall opened again." "Bobby went after you, and I went after Bobby." "You were supposed to lock the basement." "We did." Her voice trembles. "It opened upstairs." Bobby's eyelids flutter as blood trickles from his nose. Somehow, he forces a weak grin. "Good news," he mutters. "Your store has more floor space than we thought." Clark drops beside him and yanks at the cords, but they cling like wet roots, tightening every time he pulls. Beneath Bobby's shirt, something pulses in perfect rhythm with the flickering lights. Kat grabs Clark's wrist. "Stop." It reacts to fear. Clark stares at her. "How do you know that?" She doesn't answer. That tiny pause, barely a second, is enough. Clark has always known Kat as the quiet employee who remembers every delivery, every unpaid invoice, and every apology he forgets making. At 22, she's sharp-eyed and far too patient for a dead-end furniture job. He always assumed she stayed because she needed the paycheck, but here, in this impossible place, she looks less frightened than prepared. "What aren't you telling me?" he asks. A deafening crash echoes through the storage hall. Somewhere beyond the mountains of furniture, something enormous begins dragging itself across the floor. Kat presses the broken glass against the cords again. "Not now." "My brother disappeared in this building 8 years ago." The words hit Clark harder than the scream that follows. He freezes. 8 years earlier, before he bought the Staria, the property had been an abandoned office complex. The realtor never mentioned a missing child. No police reports, no warnings, just a price low enough to seem like a second chance. Kat keeps cutting. "He was 14. Everyone believed he ran away, but I found his camera in the basement." The last recording showed a yellow hallway that wasn't on any blueprint. Clark slowly scans the endless darkness around them. "You knew this place existed." "I knew something existed." Her jaw tightens. "I took this job because the building changed owners, because you started sleeping here, because I believed the door would eventually open again." Betrayal burns through Clark's fear. Every late shift, every basement repair, every time Kat asked if he'd heard humming in the middle of the night, it hadn't been concern. "You used me." For the first time, Cat meets his eyes. I watched you for 2 years to make sure you weren't the reason it opened. Before Clark can respond, Bobby suddenly gasps. His back arches violently. One by one, the cords sink beneath his skin and disappear. The fluorescent lights flash blood red. Then a deep voice rumbles from unseen speakers. 3 returned, 1 remains. Furniture crashes behind them. A towering figure unfolds between 2 wardrobes, an impossibly tall creature made of endless joints and pale limbs, with a human face stretched grotesquely across its chest. Bobby convulses once, then he goes completely still. Clark grabs him. Bobby. Look at me. Bobby's eyes open. They are no longer brown. They glow with the same sickly yellow light as the first hallway. He smiles, but the voice that emerges isn't his. It belongs to a child. Cat, it whispers. Your brother found the red room. The creature lurking in the shadows suddenly breaks into a sprint. Cat slices through the final cord. Clark throws Bobby over his shoulder, and the 3 of them race between collapsing stacks of furniture. The floor trembles beneath their feet. Overhead, fluorescent lights explode one after another. Ahead, a steel door appears where no door existed moments before. Cat reaches it first and slams her hand against the handle. Locked. From the other side, 3 slow knocks echo through the metal. Then comes the voice of a boy. Cat. Don't open it. I'm not alone. The voice returns, thin and breathless. Cat. Move away. Her hand remains frozen on the handle. Every muscle in her arm locks. For 8 years, she has imagined this moment in countless ways of her brother alive, older, waiting to be rescued. But the voice beyond the door still sounds exactly as it did when he disappeared. 14 years old, Clark watches hope flare across her face, then shatter. Ellie, she whispers. Something slammed against the door from the other side, bending the metal outward. Cat jumped back as a black hand burst through the gap, its fingers groping blindly. Those aren't human fingers, she whispered. Too many joints. Too long. Behind them, the pale creature drew closer, smashing wardrobes aside as if they were made of cardboard. Clark adjusted Bobby's weight across his shoulders. Pick a direction. There isn't one, Cat replied. Then Bobby slowly lifted his head. His glowing yellow eyes stared past Clark toward a blank concrete wall. A doorway appeared. There was no sound, no warning. One moment the wall was solid concrete, the next, a narrow white door with a brass handle stood beneath a single glowing light. Clark didn't trust the door, but he trusted the creature even less. They ran. The instant Cat crossed the threshold, the storage hall disappeared. The thunder of collapsing furniture stopped mid-crash. Clark stumbled into a quiet office with gray carpeting, softly humming computers, and fluorescent lights that burned steadily without flickering. Bobby slipped from Clark's shoulders and landed on the floor, coughing violently. Cat slammed the door shut behind them. The pale creature never followed. For several long seconds, no one moved. Then one of the computers came to life. A video began to play. The screen showed the basement of the furniture store years earlier. The shaky footage revealed a 14-year-old Eli nervously carrying a camera down the stairs, whispering to himself. He reached the familiar yellow wall and placed a trembling hand against it. The surface bent beneath his touch. Cat stepped closer to the screen. Eli passed through the wall, but he wasn't alone. A younger Dr. Mary Clenn followed him. Her hair was shorter, her face pale with fear. Clark felt the room tilt. Mary carried a red notebook in one hand and a small black device covered with blinking lights in the other. She didn't seem shocked by the impossible hallway. Instead, she looked like someone returning to a place she knew all too well. The recording skipped ahead. Now Eli was crying. Mary gripped his shoulders, trying to steady him. Something pounded through the walls behind them. The structure responds to memory, she said into the camera. Fear gives it form. Guilt gives it doors. A chill spread through Clark's body. The footage jumped again. Eli was gone. Mary stood alone inside a red room, staring directly into the camera. Her hands were covered in blood. I'm sorry, she whispered. I needed someone that could keep instead of me. Cat stopped breathing. The screen went black. Silence filled the room. Then every computer powered on at once. Each monitor displayed a different memory from Clark's life via his wedding, Lucy's birth, The first drink he secretly hid, the night his wife left. Therapy sessions with Mary, every shameful secret, every painful failure, and in the corner of every image stood the same blurred figure, Mary. Clark stepped backward. She knew. Kat's expression went blank, her grief burned away, replaced by something colder and far more dangerous. She fed my brother to this place. Bobby laughed. It wasn't his laugh. The voice of the child returned through his mouth. She fed many. Clark slowly turned. Bobby stood up with stiff, unnatural movements, as though every step had been carefully rehearsed. Yellow light leaked from beneath his eyelids. She found the door when she was young, he said. She learned what it wanted. What does it want? Clark asked. Bobby tilted his head. A home. The office walls began to breathe. Gray paint tripled like living skin. The computers slowly melted into their desks. Beneath the carpet, something enormous shifted from one side of the room to the other. Kat spotted the red notebook lying beside a keyboard, the same one Mary had carried in the recording. She opened it. Its pages were packed with floor plans, names, dates, and hand-drawn circles marking Clark's address, his furniture store, and his daughter's school. One sentence had been underlined over and over: "The architect can close it." Clark stared at the words. His profession, his training, his lifelong obsession with designing rooms and structures. Mary had never chosen him as a patient because he was broken. She had chosen him because he could build. Behind them, the door unlocked with a quiet click. Mary stood in the doorway. Tears streamed down her face. A pistol rested firmly in her hand. "Clark," she said softly, "you were never supposed to find out this soon." Then she aimed the gun at Kat. She fired. Kat dropped before the echo of the gunshot had faded. Clark saw the muzzle flash, felt the heat brush his cheek, and heard the bullet slam into the wall behind her. She was alive. She had rolled clear at the last second. Mary shifted her aim for another shot, but Clark slammed into her from the side. The pistol skidded across the floor before disappearing beneath a desk that was already sinking into the carpet. Mary clawed at his face. Clark seized her wrist. For one savage moment, therapist and patient abandoned every pretense of civility. "You chose me," he growled. Mary's eyes darted toward the red notebook in Kat's hands. "I chose someone who might survive." The breathing walls tightened around them. Desks splintered, ceiling panels bent downward. Bobby stood perfectly still in the center of the room, yellow light pouring from his eyes as the office folded inward around him. His voice now came from every direction. "Build." Mary stopped struggling. That single word terrified her more than the gun ever had. She shoved Clark aside and sprinted for the door. Kat caught her by the coat, slamming her hard against the frame. "My brother," Kat said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where is he?" Mary looked into her eyes. Whatever answer she carried shattered the last trace of resistance on her face. "Everywhere." Kat struck her. At that instant, the room split apart. A jagged crack ripped through the floor, tearing carpet and concrete open. Beneath it was not darkness. It was another level, a vast maze of crimson rooms, endless staircases, and twisting corridors shifted like the gears of a colossal machine. Hundreds of feet below, Clark watched countless doors open and close. People moved within them. Some run, some crawl, others simply stand motionless, facing the walls. One of them is a boy in a gray jacket. "Ellie!" Kat screams as she drives toward the opening. Clark catches her belt just inches before she plunges through. The boy below looks up. Although 8 years have passed in the outside world, his face hasn't aged a single day. His lips move without making a sound. Then a crimson wall slides between them. Kat struggles against Clark's grip. "Let me go. You'll die. I've been waiting 8 years." The floor groans again. Clark pulls her back just as the crack seals shut, leaving nothing but smooth gray carpet behind. Kat pounds his chest once before collapsing against him, shaking so violently that her teeth chatter. Mary picks up the notebook. "We have minutes," she says quietly, "maybe less." Kat turns toward her with murder in her eyes, but Mary doesn't flinch. "Kill me later. Right now, this place is waking up." Clark looks at Bobby. "What did it do to him?" "It's using him as a mouth," Mary replies. and Eli as a foundation. She opens the notebook to a series of detailed sketches of circles nested inside endless corridors, rooms connected by impossible angles, and a central chamber marked with a solid black square. She points to the center. The back rooms don't exist beneath your store. Your store exists above one of its entry points. This place has no fixed size. It grows through human memory, recreating rooms where fear, shame, or grief left the deepest scars. Every person trapped here gives it more material to build with. Clark remembers his living room, Lucy's voice, the family photographs. Mary continues. Most people become lost, a few become anchors. Their memories stabilize entire sections of this place. Eli became one. Bobby is becoming another. Kat wipes the blood from her lip. Then we cut them loose. You can remove the foundation from a building without bringing the whole structure down. Clark studies the diagrams. Unless you control the collapse. Mary meets his gaze. That was why she had searched for him, not because he was weak, but because he understood weight, stress, and structure. Long before alcohol and failure hollowed him out, Clark could look at a building and instantly see how every load traveled through it. The walls begin pulsing faster. Somewhere beyond the office, a siren starts to wail. Mary turns to the notebook's final pages. There is a central room at the first stable space this place ever created. If we reach it and redesign the pathways, we can force every level to fold inward. Clark finishes the thought, but we'd also crush everyone trapped inside. Bobby's body suddenly jerks. Thin black veins spread beneath the skin of his neck. Clark kneels beside him. Bobby, can you hear me? For a brief moment, the yellow glow disappears. Bobby's real eyes return. Boss. His voice is barely more than a whisper. Clark grips his shoulders. I'm here. It keeps showing me my mother. Clark has never heard Bobby talk about her. He only knows she died when Bobby was 12. She says I can stay. Bobby's voice trembles. She says, nobody leaves me here. The yellow light surges back. Bobby screams, and the office windows explode outward even though beyond them lies nothing but endless darkness. Mary grabs Clark's arm. We move. Now, they race into a corridor lined with thousands of clocks. Every clock shows a different time. Some spin backward, others race ahead. Above them, a digital display flashes a countdown. A cat stares at it. What happens when it reaches 0? Mary doesn't slow down. The entry point seals. Clark feels a flicker of relief. Then it's contained. No, Mary says. The opposite. Your store becomes the new center. Images suddenly flicker across the corridor walls. Bobby helping customers. Cat unlocking the front entrance. Families testing mattresses. Children hiding inside wardrobes. The back rooms have been studying everyone who ever entered the store, mapping them, learning them, remembering them. If the countdown reaches 0, the building won't disappear. It will open. Every showroom door will lead somewhere else. Every customer inside will become another memory, another room, another foundation. Clark runs even faster. The corridor narrows into a concrete tunnel filled with warm water. Lights shimmer beneath the surface. Something brushes against Clark's ankle. Then another shape glides between Mary and Kat. A pale hand bursts from the water. It grabs Kat. She is dragged under. Clark dives, catching only her fingertips. Beneath the surface, dozens of pale faces stare upwards with lifeless, open eyes. Eli is among them. Kat reaches toward him. The countdown drops below 30 minutes. At the tunnel entrance, Bobby silently closes the door behind them. It slams shut. His silhouette fades behind frosted glass. The lock turns by itself. Clark plunges both arms into the warm water, sweeping through hair, clothing, and cold skin. Kat's hand slips from his grasp. Below the surface, the pale faces drift closer, their mouths hanging open in perfect unison. No bubbles, no sound, only rows of dead eyes and one familiar boy reaching for his sister. Eli. Kat stops struggling. That terrifies Clark more than the drowning itself. He dives after her. The instant his head slips beneath the surface, everything changes. The concrete tunnel disappears. He is floating inside a dark house surrounded by fragments of bedrooms, kitchens, and staircases suspended in empty space like the wreckage of forgotten memories. Whispers echo from every direction, thousands of voices, thousands of people reliving the exact moment they were taken. Cat drifts toward Eli. He looks exactly as he did 8 years ago. Wet hair, gray jacket, and the cut above his eyebrow. He raises a hand and presses it gently against hers. For one brief moment, they are simply brother and sister again. Then Clark sees them. Black cords grow from Eli's spine, stretching into the darkness thicker than ship's ropes, holding entire rooms together. Mary was right. Eli isn't trapped inside this place. He has become part of it. Clark kicks forward and wraps an arm around Kat's waist. She thrashes desperately, reaching for her brother. Eli's face twists with panic. His lips form a single word, go. The cords snap tight. Every suspended room begins moving toward them. Clark pulls Kat upward. The surface hits like glass breaking. They burst into the tunnel, choking as Mary drags them onto the concrete ledge. Kat curls on her side, coughing water from her lungs. Clark looks back. The faces are gone. Only their reflections remain. The countdown above the door reads 0183. Mary pounds on the lock. Bobby, open it. From the other side comes his mother's voice. You already left him once. Bobby screams. The door bends inward. Clark steps forward. Bobby, listen to me. That into her. Silence. Then Bobby answers in his own voice. I know. The lock clicks. Clark pulls the door open and finds Bobby on his knees, blood running from both eyes. He is holding the handle with the one hand and pressing the other against his mouth to stop himself from speaking. Behind him, the corridor has changed into a black stairwell descending far below the store. Bobby points down the center. They move. The stairs shake under each step. Walls split open, revealing pieces of their memories. Kat sees Eli's empty bedroom. Mary says herself running from the red room. Clark sees Lucy sitting at a kitchen table, waiting for a father who never came home. He does not look away. For years, he blamed alcohol, or bad luck, his wife, the collapse of his career. But the truth is uglier. He chose escape every time staying became painful. Now the backrooms offer the same choice. A door appears beside him. Warm light spills through it. Lucy stands inside. Rella Lucy, older tears in her eyes. Dad, come home. Clark stops. His whole body leans toward her. Then he notices the room behind her has no shadow. He closes the door. The staircase ends at a circular chamber filled with thousands of glowing passageways. They twist through the air like veins. At the center stands a child's wooden house, small enough to fit inside a bedroom. Mary's face drains of color. That was the first room. Clark looks at her. Whose memory? Mary does not answer. Kat understands first. Yours. The chamber trembles. Mary walks toward the little house. Each step is slower than the last. I was 6, she whispers. My father locked me in a storage room. I begged the walls to take me somewhere else. The house door cracks open. Inside sits a little girl in a red dress. Mary as a child. She smiles. You came back. Black cords explode from the house and wrap around Mary's arms, legs, throat. Kat reaches for her, but Maria shouts, no. The pathways above theme flare yellow. Bobby collapses. Clark opens the notebook and sees the final diagram. One central anchor, one living a memory holding every corridor in place. To collapse the backrooms, the first anchor must be released. Mary, she looks at Clark, cords tightening around her neck. Destroy the room. Clark stares at the child inside. The little girl begins to cry. Mary begins to choke. The countdown reaches 10 minutes and Clark realizes the truth. Destroying the room will not only kill Mary, it will erase every person whose path began with hers, including Eli, including Bobby. Clark looks from Mary to Bobby, then to Kat. Every path ends in loss. Destroy the first room and the back rooms collapse with everyone still connected to it. Leave it standing and the countdown reaches 0. The furniture store opens like a wound. Hundreds enter. Then thousands? The little girl inside Thea's wooden house begins sobbing. Mary's younger self presses both palms against the walls. "Please," she whispers, "take me somewhere else." Clark finally understands. The Backrooms were not born from evil, they were born from escape. One frightened child wished for another room, and the place kept building them. Rooms for grief, rooms for shame, rooms for memories nobody could bear to face. Every person who ran from pain gave the maze an author corridor. Clark closes the notebook. "We don't destroy the anchor," he says. Maria struggles against the cords. "They not everyone dies." "No. We change what Ida carries." He steps towards the house. Thea air thickens. Pathways whip around Thea's chamber. The Backrooms feel his decision and begin defending themselves. Walls slam down between Clark and Thea. Others. Cat drags Bobby clear as Thea floor splits beneath them. Clark reaches the tiny door. Inside, the child Maria sits curled in the corner. He kneels. The room smells of dust, sweat, and old wood. Fingernail scratches cover Thea's walls. On the other side of the door, a man's voice shouts that she will stay locked in until she learns to behave. Clark does not tell her the voice is gone. To her, it is still happening. He sits beside her. "You wanted an author room," he says. She nods. "One where he couldn't find me." "I know. Did it work?" Clark looks through the doorway at Thea's endless maze. "Yes," he says. "A number." Thea's child stares at him, tears shining in her face. Clark takes out his plastic pirate sword, still hanging absurdly from his belt after everything. He places it on the floor between them. He has spent years hiding. 2 different rooms. Same reason. The chamber shakes harder. The countdown reaches 5 minutes. Cat screams his name. Clark keeps his eyes on the child. But a room cannot protect you only for a little while. After that, it becomes a cage. He holds out his hand. "You don't need an author room. You need someone to open this one." The child looks toward the door. Outside, adult Mary stops fighting. Her face crumples. For the first time, she is not a doctor, a liar, or the woman who sacrificed her life to save herself. She is the child still waiting in the dark. "I'm here," Mary whispers. Her younger self hears her. The girl stands. The black cords are around Mary loosening. Across the chamber, the glowing pathways begin to flicker. Mary reaches through the doorway. The child takes her hand. Light erupts from the wooden house. Note yellow, white. The cords rip free from Bobby's body. He collapses into Cat's arms, gasping. Far above them, doors burst open across every level. Trapped with people spill from red rooms, blue rooms, endless offices, flooded tunnels. Ali appears beside Cat. For one heartbeat. He is 14 again. She touches his face. "I came back for you." He smiles. "I know." Then time catches him. His body ages in seconds. 14 becomes 22. The years stolen from him rush across his face. Not his decay, but his life returning. He grabs the Cat's hand as the chamber folds inward. The countdown reaches 30 seconds. Clark runs. Mary remains beside the wooden house. "Come on," he shouts. She shakes her head. The first anchor is free. But the pathways still need somewhere to close. Someone must stay and hold them. Clark understands from her expression. Mary spent years feeding others to the maze because she was terrified of being alone inside it. Now she chooses it. "Tell them I'm sorry," she says. The walls collapse between them. Clark, Cat, Bobby, and Eli sprint through a corridor, shrinking behind their heels. Doors slam shut, ceilings drop. The furniture showroom appears ahead through a torn patch of yellow wallpaper. 10 seconds, Bobby falls. Clark hauls him up. 5. Cat and Eli cross first. 3. Clark dives through as the wall seals behind him. Silence. Morning light pours through the store windows. The pirate ship display lies broken across the floor. Every clock reads 9:18 p.m. Though the sun is rising outside, Clark turns toward the basement. Solid concrete. No doorway. No hum. Months later, the Ottoman Empire is gone. The building becomes a community center designed by Clark. filled with wide windows and doors that never lock from on the outside. Bobby manages the front desk. Kat and Eli leave together each evening, still learning how to be siblings 8 years later. Lucy visits her on a rainy afternoon. Clark does not ask her to forgive him. He listens, and when she finally takes his hand, he holds in awe without making promises he cannot prove. That night, Clark switches off the last light and stands alone in the hallway. For a moment, he hears fluorescent buzzing behind the wall, then Mary's voice, faint but calm. "Go home, Clark." He does, and for the first time in years, no door follows him. Kane Parsons did not arrive in Hollywood through film school, festival networking, or years spent directing commercials. He arrived through a yellow hallway. At 16, working largely from his bedroom, Parsons had transformed a strange internet imagery into the Backrooms. Found footage, a 9-minute YouTube short built with a Blender and Adobe After Effects. The video exploded online, and studios began contacting him within a month. 4 years later, he became A24's youngest feature film director, guiding Backrooms into theaters on May 29, 2026. That journey sounds like an overnight success fantasy. Look closer, though, and it becomes a story about a teenager protecting an idea before Hollywood could flatten it. The concept existed before Parsons touched it. Its earliest recognizable form came from a 2019 post pairing an unsettling photograph with a description of endless yellow rooms, a damp carpet, and fluorescent buzzing. Internet users expanded that fragment into a sprawling communal mythology. Parsons saw something beneath the monsters and invented lore. The quiet panic of entering a place that looks familiar but follows no human logic. Why is that doorway positioned there? Why are those stairs too narrow? Where is the exit? His horror begins with the architecture behaving incorrectly. The building does not need to chase you. Its very existence feels like a threat. That distinction shaped the feature's creative direction. Parsons resisted turning Backrooms into a conventional creature movie decorated with recognizable yellow wallpaper. He wanted the environment itself to remain the central disturbance, man-made enough to trigger recognition, unnatural enough to make the nervous system rebel. The rooms resemble offices, showrooms, and institutional corridors emptied of a purpose. You understand every individual object together. They become incomprehensible. Parsons has connected that sensation to a sensory deprivation. When stimulation disappears, the mind begins manufacturing danger. This is horror built not around what suddenly appears, but around how long nothing appears at all. Hollywood adaptations of internet phenomena usually begin by simplifying them. Parsons fought in the opposite direction. He described his responsibility as preserving the project's genetic makeup, refusing to let the feature become an unrelated film wearing Backrooms imagery like a costume. That meant respecting the web series without merely stretching found footage across 2 hours. He had already decided that a feature would need to leave the original camera format behind, allowing the audience to step back from a raw documentation and examine the psychological, spatial, and emotional questions hidden inside the mythology. Expansion, not repetition, that became the guiding principle. His influences explain why the finished vision feels broader than an online horror adaptation. Parsons has called Valve's Portal and Half-Life fundamental parts of his creative DNA, stories where sterile research facilities become puzzles and systems matter more than individual certainty. He also points toward Mr. Robot, particularly its obsession with the paranoia, hidden structures, and people attempting to understand machinery far larger than themselves. During preparation, he rented a Vancouver theater to screen Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey. That combination is revealing video game spatial logic, technological dread, and Kubrickian patience. The goal was not simply to frighten audiences. It was to make them contemplate the machinery of the maze. Then came the almost absurd leap in scale. The teenager who had on Thea created hallways digitally was given approximately 30,000 square feet of physical sets designed from his own Blender renderings. Parsons even used a Blender to pre-visualize and shortlisted the feature, carrying the language of his homemade work directly into professional production. The technology did not replace filmmaking craft. It became his method of communicating with experienced department heads that matters. Plenty of first-time directors enter large productions with taste, but no practical visual grammar. Parsons arrived having already constructed his universe virtually, angle by angle, long before the cameras entered it. A24 and Renate Entertainment released the film. Willie producers including James Wan and Osgood Perkins surrounded Parsons with veteran experience. Yet, the collaboration was not built around correcting the young filmmaker. Wan has described the project as over-driven, with a crew taking the lead from Parsons' vision. Parsons meanwhile remained willing to use the expertise around him rather than the pretending age had granted him instant mastery. That balance, extreme authorship without defensive isolation, may be the most impressive part of his transition. He protected the mystery, but he did not protect his ego. The result begins with a creative contradiction. Backrooms is an internet-born film obsessed with spaces where connection disappears. Its world was collectively imagined online. Yet, Parsons set the story in the 1990s, removing search engines, social media explanations, and lazy digital witnesses. Characters cannot upload evidence and wait for strangers to solve the puzzle. They must stand inside uncertainty. That is Parsons' real vision. Not endless lore, but the terror of incomplete knowledge and vision alone cannot sustain a feature. Beneath those fluorescent corridors, someone still had to construct a human story strong enough to keep us walking forward. A director can build the most unnerving mess imaginable, but a feature film still needs someone worth following through it. That was the central writing problem facing Backrooms. Kane Parsons' original videos worked through fragmentation, recovered tapes, corporate demonstrations, unexplained disappearances, and tiny pieces of information scattered across an invented history. A 9-minute upload could end the instant dread reached its highest point. A theatrical film could not survive an atmosphere alone. The adaptation needed characters, emotional progression, and an ending that felt intentional with how to explaining away the mystery. A24 officially credits Will Sudak as the screenwriter, with Parsons directing and supplying the universe, mythology, and a creative direction. Sudak was a practical choice for that translation. His television credits include genre-heavy series such as Ash vs. Evil Dead, while his broader experience included psychologically layered productions connected to Homeland and the Westworld. He understood serialized mystery, the art of answering only a question while quietly opening through more. Yet, the screenplay's task was stranger than adapting a novel. There was no fixed Backrooms book, no singly authoritative plot, and no protagonist audiences already knew. The source material was part anonymous internet image, part communal creepypasta, and a part Parsons' increasingly elaborate YouTube canon. Sudak therefore had to adapt a sensation before he could adapt a story. The solution was Clark, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor. An ordinary man whose failing furniture showroom contains a doorway that should not exist. Clark is already trapped before he enters the maze. His marriage has collapsed. His dream of becoming an architect has faded, and therapy has forced him to confront patterns he would rather rationalize. That is sharp screenwriting, because the external space becomes an extension of an existing condition. The Backrooms do not randomly interrupt a stable life. They appear to someone emotionally stuck, professionally cornered, and obsessed with understanding where everything went wrong. The character who cannot move forward discovers a world where every corridor appears to move forward but leads nowhere. Mary Clark's a therapist gives the narrative its second axis. Played by Renate Reinsve, she initially occupies the position of interpreter, The person expected to impose order on Clark's increasingly impossible testimony. But Mary carries her own buried drama. Meaning the relationship is never simply doctor and patient, rational observer, and unstably witness. Both characters have constructed stories about their past because those stories make survival easier. The script then places theme inside a dimension that reconstructs a familiar objects and spaces incorrectly. Memory does the same thing. It copies, distorts, and fills gaps. Suddenly, the backrooms are not merely yellow corridors, they are a machine that weaponizes the unreliable stories people tell themselves. This gives the film a more traditional dramatic spine than the YouTube series without making it conventional. The opening establishes Clark's stagnation and the showroom's financial decline. Discovery follows a mark on a basement wall, a surface that refuses to behave like solid matter. Then the impossible crossing. Aroma there. The screenplay alternates a personal investigation with traces of async, the secretive organizations studying the phenomenon. Parsons' Weba series often positioned async near the center of the mythology. The feature pushes it toward the edge, allowing new viewers to experience the space through a Clark and Mary rather than through a corporate exposition. The lore is present. It simply is not allowed to swallow the people. Parsons has openly rejected what he calls lore bloat. He knew dedicated fans would arrive to inspect logos, dates, and architectural clues, but he also knew that designing the screenplay only for those viewers would turn the movie into a homework. His approach was to return to the earliest appeal of the concept. A familiarity corrupted by one impossibly detail. Select pieces of the existing canon could remain especially async while anything requiring a 20-video explanation had to stay outside the main dramatic path. That restraint is crucial. Horror weakens when mystery becomes administration. Whenever a nightmare receives a department name, a technical diagram, and chronological wiki entry, Parsons' larger storytelling method helped maintain cohesion. He also said that he prefers beginning with the ending and working backward, establishing where the narrative must eventually arrive before planting clues throughout the journey. That philosophy suits Backrooms perfectly because the setting appears chaotic while the screenplay quietly depends on a recurrence. Rooms echo memories, objects return in altered forms. Emotional details that initially resemble character background gradually become part of the film's spatial language. The maze feels random to the characters, but the writing cannot be random. Every repeated image must create the suspicion that the environment is observing, copying, or processing them. The screenplay is not flawless. Some emotional material is expressed more directly than the visual concept requires, and viewers drawn to the radical minimalism of the original shorts may feel that conventional backstory reduces the terror. But that a compromise is also what permits the concept to sustain a feature. Sudik and Parsons do not write a 90-minute chase through fluorescent hallways. They construct a story about people becoming prisoners of their own explanations. Then place those people inside a world that turns explanation into architecture. The blueprint was finally there. What the film needed next were performers capable of making grief, obsession, and existential panic feel inside a place that deliberately feels unreal. Casting Backrooms required a strange kind of confidence. Kane Parsons was entering his first feature production while still a teenager, yet, the film needed actors capable of carrying long scenes in which architecture, not another performer, was often their primary scene partner. There would be no familiar monster constantly attacking, and no conventional villain generating a conflict, and no mythology-heavy dialogue to explain every disturbance. The faces had to hold the audience inside uncertainty. Casting director Whitney Horton helped assemble an ensemble led by Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renate Reinsve with Mark Duplass, Finna Bennett, Lucida Maxwell, and Avon Joya filling out the human world surrounding the maze. Ejiofor was the decisive choice. Clark could easily have become a standard horror protagonist, A troubled man who discovers something impossible, behaves irrationally, and spends the rest of the movie shouting that nobody believes him. Ejiofor brings too much emotional intelligence for theta simplicity. His Oscar-nominated work in 12 Years a Slave established his ability to communicate thought through a stillness, while films such as Dirty Pretty Things and The Martian showed how unnaturally he can make intelligence feel dramatic rather than decorative. Clarke needed exactly that combination. He is educated enough to study the Backrooms, wounded enough to become dependent on them, and proud enough to mistake the obsession for purpose. The casting also creates useful friction between actor and material. Ejiofor admitted that he did not initially know Parsons' YouTube series, although he was vaguely aware of online interest in liminal spaces. Only after meeting the director did he begin exploring that mythology. That distance may have helped. Clarke is not supposed to enter the Backrooms with fun knowledge or a catalogue of established rules. He encounters the place as a baffled adult trying to force impossibly architecture into a rational framework. Ejiofor's own process mirrored that discovery. Curiosity first, comprehension later, certainty never. There is something almost audacious about pairing a first-time director with an actor who had already worked under Steve McQueen, Steven Spielberg, and Ridley Scott. Yet, Ejiofor did not describe Parsons as an unprepared child being rescued by professionals. He responded to the young director's technical clarity and obvious excitement, particularly once the enormous practical set became available. Parsons had pre-visualized the feature in a blender so he could communicate exactly how bodies should move through spaces he had already explored digitally. Ejiofor supplied decades of performance experience. Parsons supplied a visual world nobody else understood completely. The age gap became part of the collaboration's energy rather than an obstacle. Renate Reinsve was an equally revealing choice for Mary. Reinsve became internationally recognized through The Worst Person in the World, where her performance could shift from impulsive comedy to quiet emotional devastation without announcing the transition. Mary requires that same instability beneath control. As a therapist, she must appear observant, measured, and professionally guarded. Also the Backrooms begin attacking her sense of reality. Those protections fracture. Renate does not play fear as a switch being flipped. She lets it spread first through concentration, then hesitation, then the growing realization that intelligence offers no protection in space without rules. The role nearly carried a different energy. In May 2025, Leo and Kristen Miliweri reported to be in early negotiations for the film. By June, A24 had officially moved forward with Ejiofor and Renate the leads. No public explanation established why the earlier talks with Milo did not result in a deal, so treating it as a dramatic replacement story would be speculation. Still, the contrast is fascinating. Milo often radiates a quick anxious intensity. Reinsve is harder to read. She can appear emotionally exposed and completely unreachable within the same shot. Or a therapist entering a world built from unstable perception. That opacity becomes an asset. Reinsve was also attracted to Parsons precisely because his creative references did not resemble those of a conventionally trained filmmaker. She praised his certainty and found it exciting that he had not absorbed the same catalogue of movies most directors use as shorthand. That comment identifies the real casting challenge. Experienced actors usually rely on a shared language. A director might ask for a scene to feel like Kubrick, Lynch, or early Cronenberg. Parsons' imagination had been shaped just as deeply by a blender, YouTube, Portal. In digital environments, the actors had to translate instructions emerging from a different visual generation. Received did not resist that difference. She leaned into it. Mark Duplass adds another kind of credibility as film. Duplass also spent much of his career moving between the intimate independent dramas, unsettling genre stories, and deceptively casual characters whose friendliness hides emotional pressure. His presence helps the movie feel populated by ordinary adults rather than horror movie pieces waiting to be removed from the board. Finn Bennett, Lucida Maxwell, and Avanya broaden that texture. Bennett brings the nervous volatility visible in true detective night country. Maxwell carries a youthful alertness that prevents Keta from disappearing into exposition. Joya has the looseness required to make Narina feel like a person who existed before the plot needed him. The ensemble is deliberately mismatched. That is the point. Even the most physically unusual casting serves the film's central logic. Robert Bobry, whose extraordinary height gives him proportions that appear almost digitally manipulated, plays a pirate Clark. The choice allows the film to create bodily wrongness practically rather than relying entirely on visual effects. A familiar human outline becomes stretched beyond comfort. Ida resembles Clark, but resemblance makes it worse. The Backrooms do not invent from nothing, they copy badly. Roski's presence turns that principle into a flesh, giving the environment a distorted human echo without reducing Ida to a conventional creature. This cast was not assembled around celebrity spectacle, it was built around different responses to uncertainty. Ego intellectualizes it, rebs it. Duplass normalizes it. And the younger ensemble members give it urgency. On paper, these are smart selections. On screen, their value depends on the details, the pauses, physical reactions, and emotional fractures that keep an abstract nightmare human. And at the center of that challenge stand I to make an impossible room feel painfully personal. The most revealing acting in Backrooms happens before anyone crosses the impossible wall. During an early therapy session, Maria asks Clark to reenact the collapse of their marriage. The exercise could have become a blunt delivery system for exposition. Instead, Chiwetel Ejiofor turns it into a small public humiliation. Clark jokes, deflects, and performs indignation as though winning the argument might retroactively repair his life. Then the bravado slips barely. His eyes stop meeting Mary's. His voice tightens and the anger begins to resemble panic. Renate Reinsve almost nothing in response, and that stillness forces Clark to hear himself. The scene establishes their interior dynamic. He floods the room. She absorbs the impact. Ejiofor's performance works because he refuses to make Clark immediately sympathetic. This man is bitter. He drinks heavily, sleeps in the furniture showroom he owns, and speaks about his failed ambitions also though other people personally stole them. Even his ridiculous pirate advertisements carry resentment. Watch his posture during those commercials. Shoulders lifted, smile stretched too wide, enthusiasm delivered with the exhausted hostility of someone trapped inside his own brand. The humor lands, but it hurts. Ejiofor understands that Clark's tragedy is not simply that life disappointed him. He has become addicted to disappointment because it excuses him from attempting anything new. The Backrooms arrive as terror, but also as opportunity. That contradiction gives the performance its engine. When Clark first enters the yellow corridors, Ejiofor does not immediately play fear. He plays recognition without understanding. His face suggests that something inside this impossible environment has answered a question he could never articulate. Curiosity pushes past self-preservation. He examines surfaces, studies dimensions, and begins mapping the space with the dormant intensity of the architect he once hoped to become. For the first time in years, Clark is useful, awake, necessary. The actor lets a purpose physically reorganize him. His walk becomes faster, his speech more precise, his eyes more alert. The maze may be destroying him, but it has also returned a version of himself he thought was gone. Ejiofor has described Clark as someone who sees the break from reality as a possible escape from himself. That idea runs through every choice. His obsession never feels like ordinary horror movie stupidity where character repeatedly enters danger because the plot requires another frightening scene. Clark needs the Backrooms, The plasia gives shape to his regret and converts a private failure into a cosmic mystery. If reality itself is broken, perhaps his broken life is not entirely his fault. Ejiofor plays that seduction with a disturbing tenderness. Clark begins treating the corridors less like a threat than a confidant, an endless system that asks nothing except that he keep exploring. The physical sets become crucial to that transformation. Ejiofor argued that building the backrooms practically kept the environment tactile and gave the actors closer access to their emotions than a largely green screen production would have allowed. You can feel that contact in his performance. His hands drag across the wallpaper. His body hesitates at the thresholds. When he pauses, he appears to be listening not just for a creature, but for the building's intention. This is environmental acting, responding to a distance, texture, temperature, and empty space as though they were dialogue cues. Critics who praised the film's restrained performances noticed the Sami's strength. Ejiofor and Reggie often answer terror through silence rather than exaggerated screaming, leaving the audience to imagine the thoughts racing behind their faces. Reinsve's challenge is almost the reverse. Mary begins from control. Her professional identity depends on listening without becoming overwhelmed, and Ryan gives her a tightly managed calm that never feels completely peaceful. There is tension in the neck, caution in the eyes, a fractional delay before certain responses. Mary does not merely study Clark. She constantly monitors herself. Reinsve has described the character as someone whose psychology has been distorted by drama while still appearing outwardly recognizable. That is exactly how she plays her. Mary's composure is not the absence of fear. It is fear organized into routine. The backrooms become dangerous because they disrupt the structure she had built around it. Once Mary enters the maze, Reinsve avoids the obvious progression from calm therapist to screaming victim. Her fear becomes quieter as the danger grows. Breathing shallows. Her gaze fixes on details for slightly too long. She moves as though sudden speed might cause the room to notice her. One critic has singled out her ability to convey primal terror without screaming, and that restraint is essential to the movie's tone. A loud performance would externalize a threat. Reinsve keeps it trapped inside her body. Your attention shifts to tiny changes, a swallowed breath, a frozen shoulder. The moment professional curiosity gives way to animal instinct. She does not tell you the space is wrong. Her nervous system does. The enormous set also appears to have genuinely affected her. She worried that spending time inside the 30,000 square feet labyrinth might make her feel slightly unhinged, and she avoided wandering through it alone. That anxiety gives Mary's scenes a useful immediacy. The actress is not pretending that the walls continue beyond the frame. They actually do. When she turns a corner, neither her body nor ours can completely dismiss the possibility of becoming disoriented. The performance and production design reinforce each other. Parsons creates a space capable of confusing the actor while Reinsve converts that confusion into character psychology. The fear does not sit on top of the set, it grows out of it. Their chemistry depends on imbalance rather than warmth. Clark wants Mary to confirm that his discovery is real. Mary initially wants to understand why he needs it to be real. Ego pushes, Reinsve withholds. He speaks in bursts, gathering momentum as though language can force belief into existence. She leaves gaps and those gaps become unbearable to him. Later, as their certainty shifts, the balance changes. Clark becomes strangely calm inside the irrational world, while Mary, previously the interpreter, loses the safety of explanation. The performances cross without ever becoming mirror images. That is the film's sharpest dramatic move. Patient and therapist do not exchange roles so much as discover that both were using different methods to avoid the same emptiness. There is a fair criticism here. The screenplay sometimes moves Clark's psychological development faster than Ejiofor can fully justify. While Mary receives less dramatic space than Ryan's performance he seems capable of filling. Some reviewers have found Clarke's decisions inconsistent and very underwritten. They are not wrong, yet the actors create continuity where the writing occasionally skips steps. Ejiofor connects Clarke's curiosity to a wounded pride, then wounded pride to a dependency. Reinsve turns limited exposition into guarded behavior, making a Mary feel more complicated than her dialogue alone suggests. The film survives its thinnest character writing because both performers understand the central fear. What happens when the thing ruining you is also the only thing making you feel alive? Ejiofor has said that acting begins by finding the connection between a character's fear and his own. Backrooms gives him an unusually abstract fear, meaninglessness, and he makes it painfully concrete. Reinsve responds with equal precision, transforming a psychological containment into physical attention. Together, they prevent the movie from becoming a beautifully designed screensaver. Yet, even a performance is controlled needed pressure from the people around them, employees, researchers, partners, and the distorted reflections who complicate the central relationship. The maze may isolate Clarke and Mary, but the ensemble determines what remains of the world outside and what follows them inside. The supporting cast enters Backrooms through comedy, which is exactly why the horror hurts. Bobby and Kat first belong to the humiliatingly ordinary world of Clarke's furniture store, where declining sales have reduced their boss to filming a pirate-themed television advertisement. Finn Bennett's Bobby treats the production with the loose amusement of an employee who knows the business is sinking, but still wants to enjoy the spectacle. Lucy Maxwell's Kat is more attentive. She helps Clarke without fully joining his delusion, watching him with a mixture of loyalty, concern, and a second-hand embarrassment. Before the maze threatens them, they make the showroom feel inhabited, messy, human. That normality gives the empty rooms something to erase. Bennett plays Bobby as casual without making him stupid. He is introduced as the more laid-back half of the young couple, and his relaxed energy initially punctures Clarke's self-importance. When Clarke asks Bobby and Kat to bring a video camera into the hidden dimension, Bobby responds like someone agreeing to help with an eccentric after-hours project, not volunteering for an expedition beyond reality. That choice matters. If he began terrified, the Backrooms would only confirm his expectations. Instead, Bennett gives us a curiosity, turning into discomfort only a room at a time. The jokes thin out. His movements become less loose. Suddenly, a young man who seemed incapable of taking anything seriously understands the danger first. His chemistry with Maxwell creates the film's most recognizable relationship. Bobby and Kat speak with the short-earth hand of people accustomed to sharing cramped spaces. Boring shifts on somebody else's failing business. They do not deliver romantic speeches because they do not need to. A glance can communicate disagreement. A change in tone can signal that one of them wants to leave. Parsons uses that familiarity as a pressure gauge. As the architecture becomes less comprehensible, they look toward each other for confirmation that their senses still work. Clarke studies the maze. Bobby and Kat study each other. That difference makes them emotionally vulnerable in a way Clarke, already surrendering to obsession, no longer is. Maxwell gets the stronger dramatic progression. Kat begins as the sensible employee, but sensible never becomes passive. She questions Clarke, handles the camera, and reacts to danger with a practical urgency rather than theatrical panic. Maxwell has a naturally alert screen presence, even when Kat says a little. Her attention keeps moving. Doorway, ceiling, Bobby, Clarke back again. You can watch her calculation changing as the group goes deeper. First, she is deciding whether Clarke is confused, then whether the place is dangerous. Finally, whether Clarke himself can still be trusted. The performance turns observation into a suspense. Kat is not simply trapped in the maze. She is trapped with a boss whose emotional need to continue outweighs everyone else's safety. That is where the supporting characters become essential to Clarke's characterization. He describes himself as someone damaged by circumstances, yet, Bobby and Kat expose the harm he causes while insisting he is only searching for answers. They have less authority, less information, and fewer emotional reasons to enter the Backrooms, but he pulls them into it anyway. Their fear becomes evidence against his self-image. Clark believes he is rediscovering his architectural purpose. From their perspective, he is an employer using loyalty as permission. Ejiofor can play Clark's obsession from the inside. Bennett and Maxwell show us its cost from the outside. Without them, his descent might look romantic. With them, it becomes selfish. Mark Duplass operates at the opposite end of the ensemble. His fill appears sparingly, often through surveillance material connected to a sink before emerging as a scientist involved in the organization's study of the Backrooms. Duplass plays institutional secrecy without turning a Phil into a melodramatic conspiracy villain. His manner is controlled, almost reassuring. That is worse. He speaks like someone who has spent years standing beside the impossible and has converted terror into a procedure. Async once produced medical imaging technology, but after discovering the Backrooms, it redirected itself toward investigating the dimension without achieving genuine understanding. Phil has access, equipment, and authority. Certainty, none. Duplass is perfectly suited to that ambiguity. His performances often make casual friendliness feel slightly invasive, and Phil weaponizes the same quality. He does not need to threaten anyone directly because the sealed rooms, cameras, and protective suits already communicate the power imbalance. When he explains what Async knows, the column delivery cannot disguise the terrifying truth. The institution monitoring this phenomenon may be only marginally less confused than the people trapped inside it. The role risks becoming late to arriving exposition, and some critics have felt the research company material was underdeveloped. Duplass survives that problem by making Phil feel like a mono withholding more than the screenplay allows him to say. Enjoy as Narina Warren occupies far less screen time. Buddha performs a crucial tonal function. The opening places the audience inside an async expedition before Clark's story begins. Connecting the feature to the recovered footage language of Parsons' web series, Joy has little opportunity for conventional characterization. His body, breathing, and camera movement must carry the sequence. Naren is less a fully developed supporting protagonist than a warning transmitted from another narrative. He proves that Clark is noted discovering an untouched miracle. Other people entered first. They brought technology, procedures, and confidence. The Backrooms followed all three. Joy's presence gives longtime viewers a lore connection while giving newcomers an immediate lesson in helplessness. Even Robert Barbara's pirate Clark belongs to the ensemble's larger pattern of distorted relationships. Bobby and Kat reflect what Clark does to other people. Phil reflects the false security of institutional knowledge. Naren reflects the explorers who came before him. Pirate Clark reflects Clark himself, who is stretched into something physically impossible. The supporting cast therefore does more than fill the space as around two leads. Each performer offers a different response to the unknown. Humor, loyalty, procedure, panic, or imitation. Together, they make the Backrooms feel capable of corrupting not only architecture, but every form of human connection. And that corruption becomes visible because the physical world surrounding them, the furniture, quarters, wallpaper, and impossibly replicas has been designed with an obsessive precision. The defining image of Backrooms looks almost insultingly simple. Yellow wallpaper, damp-looking carpet, fluorescent ceiling panels, and the corridors leading nowhere. Recreate it badly and the movie becomes a themed escape room. Polish it too much and the internet-born ugliness disappears. Production designer Danny Verretta therefore faced a harder task than building an obviously spectacular fantasy world. He had to reproduce a visual mediocrity with extraordinary precision, working with art director Alan Dirksen and set decorator Trevor Johnston. Verrett turned Kane Parsons, a digitally designed environment, into approximately 30,000 square feet of practical construction spread across 4 Vancouver soundstages. The emptiness was expensive. The blandness was engineered. Parsons began by designing his ideal labyrinth in a Blender, the same software that had allowed him to create the original YouTube series. His proposed layout reached roughly 100,000 square feet. The file was so enormous that it crashed Verrett's computer and had to be separated into manageable sections. Budget and stage space reduced the physical construction, but that limitation forced the team to identify which rooms needed genuine depth, which transitions demanded actor interaction, and where visual effects could extend the illusion. Parsons did not arrive with a few sketches and a mood board. He arrived with a navigable world. The production department's job was to translate digital spatial logic into wood, fabric, steel, and carpet. That translation depended on repetition. Never exact repetition. Corridors narrow by degrees. Ceiling heights feel subtly wrong. Corners interrupt expected sight lines. Ramps, platforms, slopes, and layered levels prevent the maze from remaining a flat grid of office rooms. Verrett wanted the actors to climb, crawl, and squeeze through spaces that physically disturb their balance. This is where the designate escapes the obvious endless hallway interpretation. The back rooms are not simply large. They reject ergonomic sense. Stairs, openings, and floor levels appear to have been constructed without considering the human body, creating the impression that no persona designed them at all. The architecture resembles a memory of architecture assembled by something that never had to live inside a building. Then there is the yellow, sickly, familiar, almost warm, and completely unbearable after prolonged exposure. The team spent about a month developing the wallpaper, reportedly producing dozens of variations and camera tests before finding a pattern and tone that matched the degraded digital character of Parsons' shorts. Verrett understood that in the original images color may have resulted partly from incorrect white-out balance. The real room was probably closer to beige, but accuracy to the physical location was irrelevant. The corrupted photograph had become the mythology. The feature had to reproduce not the room as it existed, but the room as the internet remembered it. The scale behind that ugliness is almost comic. The production printed tens of thousands of square feet of wallpaper and approximately 27,000 square feet of carpeting. Large sections of drop-heated ceiling also had to remain structurally secure while accommodating lights, camera routes, and breakaway points. Empty sets reveal every flaw. There are no decorative objects or buzzy backgrounds available to conceal joints and supports. That exposure becomes part of the film's visual tension. Look closely and everything appears cheaply manufactured. Look, and the construction becomes impossibly continuous. The audience recognizes the materials from offices, waiting rooms, and budget hotels, but cannot imagine the human purpose behind arranging them this way. The real world receives equal attention because the back rooms only feel uncanny when ordinary life has first been made concrete. Clark's furniture showroom is filled with boxy televisions, floral upholstery, fake wood finishes, bargain signage, and display bedrooms that promise comfort without containing real domestic life. Verrett's team searched for mint-condition 1990s furniture while the graphic designate embraced the desperate visual language of failing retail. Oversized slogans, easy credit promises, and merchandise arranged to simulate homes nobody actually inhabits. Clark eventually sleeps in a floor model bed surrounded by display lamps. Funny at first glance, devastating after a second. He already lives inside artificial rooms before discovering the infinite version beneath them. Color quietly guides that descent. The showroom's upper level leans into defeated grays and blues, reflecting Clark's emotional stagnation. In the basement, those tones drift toward beige before surrendering to the back room's yellow, The transition does not feel like crossing from reality into fantasy. It feels like reality becoming a progressively less healthy, that is a smarter choice. A dramatic burst of a supernatural color would create a separation. Verrett instead designs a contamination. The impossible world seems to have been waiting inside the ordinary one all along, hidden within its cheap materials and neglected corners. The portal is frightening because the visual language on both sides already belongs to Clarke. As the film moves deeper, recognizable spaces and objects return in damaged forms. Furniture becomes partially consumed by floors or walls. Domestic environments are copied without understanding their emotional purpose. The design follows the mechanics of fading memory. First, the broad shape survives. Then, dimensions drift, details disappear, and the relationships between objects stop making sense. A sofa remains a sofa, but its position feels impossible. A childhood room returns, but only as an architectural approximation. Here, the backrooms become more than a maze. Thea behaved like an enormous machine attempting to reconstruct human experience from corrupted information. The mistakes are the horror. Even a costume design, led by Mark Duplass, supports that world rather than competing with it. The clothing remains recognizably early 1990s, but muted enough to keep faces and bodies readably against the aggressive wallpaper. Clarke's pirate persona adds a sad layer of manufactured theatricality. Amanda costumed as an adventurer while living inside commercial failure, then entering a place that turns his artificial identity into something grotesquely literal. Production design, decoration, and costume all circle the same idea. People create environments to express who they are. The backrooms absorb Thea expressions, remove their meaning, and return them as traps. That physical craftsmanship gives backrooms its body. But architecture alone does not determine how we experience it. The camera must decide whether a corridor feels endless or cramped, whether an empty doorway invites curiosity or announces danger, and whether the maze looks physically real or digitally impossible. Verrett constructed the nightmare. Cinematographer Jeremy Coax had to teach it how to watch us back. The camera in Backrooms faces an unusual problem. How do you photograph emptiness without making emptiness visually empty? Jeremy Cox's answer is to treat every room as a composition awaiting to betray the person inside it. Doors sit too close to frame edges. Characters occupy less space than the architecture surrounding them. Corridors continue beyond where the eye expects them to stop. Cox had previously worked in the visual orbit of Osgood Perkins, shooting second unit material on Long Legs and The Monkey before serving as lead cinematographer on Keeper. That experience with controlled architectural horror made him an ideal partner for Kane Parsons. Both filmmakers understand that a room can threaten someone before anything enters it. Their visual strategy begins with separation. Outside the back rooms, the camera is comparatively reserved. Clarke's showroom, That's All I Saw, Mary's and the other ordinary locations area photographed through stable frames and a simple blocking partly inspired by the clinical compositions of 1 hour photo. Cox and Parsons wanted to create an interesting image of a room, place the actors inside it, then allow behavior to generate the scene. The backrooms receive more movement because entering them changes the film's relationship with space. Reality observes people from a distance, the maze follows them. That shift is subtle enough to feel instinctive, but it changes everything. Watch how often the characters appear small within wide compositions. A conventional horror film might push art rapidly into close-ups, isolating faces, and hiding whatever waits beyond the frame. Backrooms frequently keeps the surrounding geometry visible. The audience is forced to scan doorways, corners, and empty stretches of wallpaper while simultaneously reading the actor's reaction. Negative space becomes active space. Your eye keeps searching because the composition appears to be withholding something. Sometimes it is, often it is not. That uncertainty trains the viewer to fear the entire image rather than only a designated shadow. Reviews repeatedly singled out this use of wide-angle photography and close character following as central to the film's immersion. Cox also resisted the instinct to make every frame neatly asymmetrical. Earlier in his career, he was drawn to placing the camera perpendicular to a back wall, flattening rooms into controlled geometric images. For Backrooms, he deliberately pushed himself toward off-center framing, A-slide tilts, asymmetry, and sharp siding, placing a character close to the edge they are looking toward instead of giving their gaze comfortable visual space. The uniform yellow environment made that experimentation possible. Even when the camera leaned or drifted, the repeating walls maintained cohesion. The result feels organized and wrong at once. Like a picture assembled according to rules that differ by a few degrees from our own. Lighting becomes even a stranger because inside the main yellow labyrinth, Cox added no conventional film lights. The illumination comes from fixtures built directly into the ceiling using Astro-Titan tubes positioned behind diffusers. The placement required a careful testing. Too close and the individual tubes would announce themselves as movie equipment. Too far and the fluorescent effect would lose its oppressive consistency. This gives the characters nowhere visually safe to hide. Shadows exist, but there is no comforting darkness. Every wall is exposed beneath flat overhead light. Horror usually promises danger and what cannot be seen. Backrooms finds danger in seeing too much and understanding none of it. The yellow required its own technical solution. The famous source image was not necessarily photographed in a room that intensely yellow. Its sickly color partly came from white balance distortion. Reproducing that effect entirely through camera settings would also contaminate skin tones, turning the actors into extensions of the wallpaper. Instead, the production made the physical walls more yellow, allowing Cox to photograph human faces with relative naturalism against an environment that remained visually diseased. This is where cinematography and production design become inseparable. The color does not merely decorate the room, it isolates flesh from architecture, making the characters look like foreign objects the space has not yet absorbed. Then the film breaks its polished feature language with found footage. Those sequences were captured on a Komodo using a cropped Super 16 sensor molded in 864mm zoom lens. After visual effects work was completed, the footage was transferred to VHS. Fully digital blender material went through the same degrading process. Think about the absurd technical loop, a modern digital capture, computer-narrated extensions, deliberate analog deterioration. The production used sophisticated tools to recreate the limitations of an amateur camcorder. That degradation is not economic. Reduced clarity forces the imagination to complete shapes. Hides the border between practical material and computer imagery, and reconnects the feature to Parsons' original YouTube language. Operating those sequences demanded more control than the apparent chaos suggests. Parsons had keyframed handheld movement in his animated shorts, designing camera accidents with frame-by-frame precision. Cox had to reproduce that sensation physically while actors reacted directly to the lens. The camera stumbles, searches, and turns too late, but still lends unrequired story beats. Ida behaves like another frightened performer. Found footage often fails when every shake feels artificially planned or completely unreadable. Here the movement sits between panic and choreography. We believe the operator is losing control even though the film never does. Visual effects extend rather than replace the sets. Parsons confirmed that most surfaces touched or walked upon were physically constructed. Blender and digital extensions handled spaces too vast or impossible to build, and joint areas spread across separate stages. That practical foundation gives the effects a stable visual grammar. The camera can pass from real carpet and walls into impossible scale without a suddenly changing texture. Some images become openly surreal, architecture folding into monumental voids. humaniforms copied incorrectly. But the film earns those moments by first convincing us that the ordinary corridors possess a weight. The unreal grows from the real instead of floating above it. Cox and Parsons never chase beauty for its ownness sake. Their images are too flat, too yellow, too vacant to offer conventional visual pleasure. Yet that refusal creates something more memorable. Cinematography that makes the audience see it perform surveillance. We inspect. We anticipate. We mistrust every crinoline. The camera gives the backrooms a dimensions, but sound gives theme a presence. The electrical hum, distant impacts, and impossible silences that suggest the maze continues long after the image cuts away. Before the backrooms become visible, they become audible. A low electrical hum enters beneath the scene and refuses to leave. It is not loud enough to dominate our attention, yet it changes the pressure of the room. Fluorescent lights buzz. Air seems to move through vents that might not exist. Footsteps return with a slightly too much echo. Supervising sound editor and sound designer Eugenio Battaglia builds the environment from noises associated with the workplaces, basements, and failing electronics. Dana stretches them until familiarity becomes a physical discomfort. The result is not a haunted house soundtrack. It sounds like an ordinary building continuing to operate long after every human purpose has disappeared. Kane Parsons understood his sonic identity before he understood a feature filmmaking. Sound had already carried much of his YouTube series. Mono recordings, camera, microphone distortion, heavy breathing, and the constant whir of overhead fixtures. For the movie, Parsons wanted that language preserved, but widened. The found footage material retains a compressed edge quality while the conventional scenes expand across the theater through a deeper bass and broader spatial movement. The maze no longer sounds trapped inside a camcorder. It surrounds the audience. Parsons described the feature's sound as richer and more wind-like than the shorts while still resembling an old transmission echoing backward from the future. That contrast between small recordings and massive spaces where the design becomes truly unsettling. A distant impact may arrive without a visible source. A voice seems close, then returns from somewhere impossibly far away. Long corridors distort direction, so the audience cannot confidently decide whether a sound comes from ahead, behind, or inside the walls. This is acoustic architecture. Audio-defining dimensions the camera cannot show. The backrooms feel infinite because their echoes imply unseen chambers beyond every frame. Silence then becomes equally important. When the electrical bed suddenly drops away, the absence does not calm us. It means the environment has changed so behavior. Parsons co-composed the score with Ido van Bremen, who had already worked within atmospheric horror in all films including The Monkey and Keeper. Parsons brought the musical instincts developed across his online projects. Van Bremen brought formal scoring experience and the ability to shape those instincts across a 10-minute feature. Their primary influences included Aphex Twin Boards of Canada and burial artists who can make electronic music feel nostalgic, mechanical, and emotionally distant at the same time. Parsons admits he lacks traditional instrumental training, describing his method less as classical composition than experimentation, finding textures, combining them, and following the emotional reaction they produce. The score rarely behaves like a traditional horror theme. Parsons' melodic material repeats clearly only once. Almost everything else continues evolving. Gentle drones widen until they become pressure. Soft tones accumulate digital scars. Bass does not always strike. It swells, suggesting something enormous moving beneath the floor. That a refusal to settle into a recognizably tune matches the architecture. A melody usually promises return. Chorus, a refrain, resolution. The backrooms don't return. Their music keeps mutating just as their corridors repeat without leading back to safety. Critics repeatedly praise this combination of muted ambience, throbbing low frequencies, and unstable electronic texture. The album's quieter cues exposit another side of the film. Handprint begins with a delicate arpeggio that almost offers comfort, while furniture element transforms domestic warmth into a something foggy and half-remembered. Even the track titles, Quiet Wall in a Dark Room, Feeling of a Door Imminently a Remembered and Old Home Not Yet Built to sound like fragments recovered from a damaged subconscious. The music does not merely announce danger. It mourns places that never existed correctly. That emotional ambiguity matters because Clark is not only frightened by the maze, he is drawn toward it. The scar you must make the Backrooms feel hostile and strangely intimate at once. Parsons and Van Bremen also understand that ugliness can be musical. Pirate Shanty, a connected to Clark's desperate furniture commercial, uses cheerful theatricality that becomes painful through context. Café Bossa V1 resembles anonymous waiting room music, pleasant enough to be ignored, yet eerie when detached from a functioning public space. These cues capture the film's central contradiction. Nothing is inherently frightening about the retail jingles. Old music or a fluorescent noise, remove the people those sounds were designed to serve and they become evidence of a vanished system, still pretending everything is normal. That is pure Backrooms logic, comfort copied without understanding a comfort. The end credits complete the circle with Bards of Canada's The World Becomes Flesh. The placement is more than an influential artist receiving a fashionable needle drop. Boards of Canada helped define the degraded, a nostalgic electronic atmosphere Parsons was already chasing, so their music feels like a distant ancestor answering the film back. After nearly 2 hours of a distorted memory, false rooms, and obsolete technology, the track arrived as a less like release than continuation. The movie ends. The signal remains. Sound may be the film's most effective weapon because it survives darkness, distance, and closed doors. We can look away from the yellow walls. We cannot stop hearing the hum. Yet, those carefully engineered noises were created through a production that moved from teenage bedroom experiments to 4 soundstages, an enormous practical maze, and a compressed professional schedule. The finished atmosphere feels effortless. Making it was anything but. The strangest moment in the making of Backrooms did not involve a difficult stunt or malfunctioning visual effect. It happened when Kane Parsons walked into a place he already knew. For years, he had navigated those yellow corridors in City Blender, moving virtual cameras through rooms that existed only as geometry on a computer. Then, a professional crew built them around him. Parsons described the experience as crossing into a familiar location that had never previously existed. No psychological distance, no feeling of looking at a replica. The walls from his screen were suddenly solid. He could touch them, walk between them, get lost inside his own imagination. For a filmmaker whose entire mythology concerns reality becoming physically unstable, the production itself began with a real version of that sensation. The road to that soundstage had moved almost violently fast. Parsons uploaded his first Backrooms film in 2022 at 16, met James Wan remotely after its viral rise and visited the set of Night Swimmer in 2023 when he was 17. Within a few years, he was directing Chilio for Renate Reinsve and Mark Duplass on an A24-backed feature involving 21 laps, Atomic Monster, Churn Entertainment, and the producer Osgood Perkins. That kind of leap usually produces a comforting publicity narrative about mentorship. Parsons' version is messier and more revealing. He remained anxious that his age and lack of professional SATA experience would cause him to violate some invisible rule of filmmaking etiquette. His answer was preparation so exhaustive that uncertainty had nowhere to hide. He shortlisted the entire feature in Blender. Not storyboards. Not a handful of digital concept images. Parsons built environments, positioned virtual cameras, and explored how scenes might unfold before physical construction was complete. Cinematographer Jeremy Coax entered that digital workspace with him, Adjusting the architecture to strengthen specific compositions. A corridor could widen because a lens needed room to breathe. A wall could shift because a character's placement felt more disturbing off-center. Production design and cinematography were therefore developing simultaneously rather than waiting for one department to finish it before the other began. The sets were not passive locations later photographed by the camera. They were partially sculpted by the images the camera intended to make. Parsons' first idealized map covered around 100,000 square feet and was so large that it crashed production designer Danya Verret's computer. Reality eventually reduced the build to roughly 30,000 square feet across 4 Vancouver soundstages. Still an enormous footprint for a film centered on deliberately empty rooms. Verret's grew raised platforms, inserted dead ends, created steep floors, and layered the construction vertically so performers would not merely walk through interchangeable corridors. They would climb, duck, hesitate, and physically negotiate the architecture. The build developed over several months while the exterior material was being filmed. When Parsons returned to the completed maze, years of solitary digital work had become a collaborative industrial object surrounding him from every direction. The transition from on-person animation into a full crew can easily have broken his authority. Parsons was accustomed to controlling every pixel himself. A feature requires hundreds of people to interpret decisions through separate crafts, schedules, and practical limitations. Producer Chris Ferguson helped configure the Vancouver production around Parsons' unusual process, while Perkins functioned as what Parsons called a creative defense, someone who understood the source material and protected its artistic character. Parsons also knew when to differ. That balance is the real behind-the-scenes achievement. He did not attempt to prove authorship by rejecting professional expertise. He supplied clear answers about the world, then allowed specialists to solve the physical problems he had never previously encountered. Enthusiast problems were wonderfully specific. The team tested roughly 40 wallpaper versions before finding a shade that reproduced the digital image through a camera. Thousands of square feet of carpet to remain consistent across separate stages. Ceiling fixtures needed to provide usable photographic light while still resembling hostile fluorescence. Portal crossings were redesigned for as much incorporated camera execution as possible, forcing departments to coordinate walls, platforms, actor movement, and lens position with mechanical precision. Even locating suitable 1990s furniture became difficult because the pieces had to look period correct yet new enough to belong on a showroom floor. Mundane objects required obsessive labor. That is the delicious irony of Backrooms. An army of craftspeople worked to create the sensation that no intelligent designer had ever touched the place. The Mazza then started doing part of the directing. Ejiofor admitted that he became lost while attempting to cross the set toward catering, especially during the earliest days of filming. Crew members experienced the same disorientation. Renate Reinsve said she never felt completely at ease inside the environment, and its uninterrupted corridors gave the performances a physical uncertainty that could not be recreated by asking actors to stare at green screens. The practical build imposed genuine distance between people. A performer disappearing around a corner could actually vanish from another actor's sight. Footsteps could come from connected rooms. Wrong turns remained possible. The production did not merely provide scenery for fear. It manufactured conditions in which mild confusion was always available. Parsons' youth also changed the emotional atmosphere around the work. Each who initially assumed that some physical version of the Backrooms must have existed before because the original shorts felt so tactile. Discovering that Parsons had created them digitally and watching the director's delight as the sets came alive gave the veteran actor another way into the project. Mark Duplass later pushed back publicly against speculation that Parsons had served merely as a youthful figurehead, stating that the director was fully in control. That defense matters because Hollywood has a long habit of celebrating young creators while quietly suggesting adults must have performed the real work. Here, experienced collaborators consistently describe a preparedness, technical fluency, and a command, not a studio machine concealing an overwhelmed novice. Preparation did not eliminate improvisation, it created a room for it because Parsons and Coxa could examine scenes virtually before shooting. They could reshape physical areas while construction continued. Because the actors were surrounded by aerial walls, reactions could emerge from a movement rather than being calculated in isolation. Because the maze occupied multiple stages, visual effects could concentrate on joining spaces and extending scale instead of inventing every surface from nothing. That workflow preserved the rough-hand media DNA of the YouTube films even as the project gained studio resources. Bigger did not have to mean cleaner. More expensive did not have to mean safer. The production used professional machinery to protect the uncomfortably imperfection that made the original a phenomenon spread. The making of Backrooms therefore mirrors its story. An individual constructs a private world. Other people enter it and the structure grows beyond the scale anyone originally imagined. The difference is that this maze led somewhere very real. A theatrical release carrying enormous expectations from both established horror audiences and millions of online viewers. A24 and its partners had gambled on a first-time director, an abstract internet mythology, and 30,000 square feet of yellow uncertainty. Once the doors opened, that gamble stopped being a production story and became a financial one, and the numbers would turn Parsons' improbable debut into something even Hollywood could not dismiss. The most astonishing number attached to Backrooms is not the worldwide gross. It is $10 million. That was the reported production budget for a film containing 4 sound stages, a 30,000 square foot practical labyrinth, Oscar-nominated actors, and extensive digital environments. In modern studio terms, $10 million is not blockbuster money. It is risk management money, the kind of controlled investment that allows an unusual horror concept to succeed without needing universal appeal. A24 and Churn Entertainment did not require Kane Parsons to deliver Marvel-sized revenue. Then the movie opened like one. By June 18, 2026, Backrooms had earned approximately $168 million domestically and between $265 million and $270 million worldwide, depending on reporting updates between box office trackers. The warning signs, or promises, arrived on Thursday night. Preview screenings generated an estimated $10.4 million, an extraordinary figure for an original R-rated science fiction horror film. Friday's total reached $38.4 million when previews were included. By the end of its first domestic weekend, Backrooms had collected $81.4 million from 442 theaters, averaging roughly $23,658 per location. The global launch reached about $118 million. For perspective, A24's previous opening weekend record belonged to Alex Scarlett's Civil War with a $25.5 million. Backrooms did not narrowly improve that record. It earned more than 3 times as much. That opening tells us something more interesting than young people bought tickets. Parsons had spent years building audience trust before A24 sold a single seat. His YouTube series accumulated hundreds of millions of views across its videos and surrounding online conversation, while Backrooms imagery spread independently through TikTok, Reddit, games, and fan-made lore. The movie therefore arrived as an original film in franchise clothing. It had no previous theatrical installment and no traditional intellectual property owner guiding audience expectations, yet millions of viewers already recognize it as the yellow wallpaper. Hollywood usually pays enormous sums to purchase that level of awareness. Parsons had generated it through short-form filmmaking, mystery, and community participation. The release amplified that advantage. A24 opened the film wide on May 29, positioning it as a genuine summer attraction rather than a small genre picture waiting for word of mouth. The strategy was aggressive, more than 3,400 domestic theaters, premium showtimes, and marketing built around imagery rather than lengthy bloated explanation. Sell the doorway. Sell the Sell the fear of getting lost. That campaign allowed longtime followers to recognize the mythology while newcomers could understand the premise instantly. You did not need to know async or watch a Parsons web series. You only needed to imagine stepping through a wall and never finding the way back. Its second weekend brought the inevitable correction. Domestic revenue fell approximately 68% to $26.3 million. That is a steep drop, especially for a movie whose opening promised such extraordinary momentum, but context matters. Horror films with enormous fan-driven premieres often decline sharply because their most committed viewers arrive immediately. Backrooms had already earned $19.1 million domestically during its first full week, crossing $100 million on the sixth day and overtaking Marty Supremia as A24's highest-grossing domestic release. The drop did not transform a success into disappointment. It merely confirmed that the film behaved like an event-driven genre release rather than a slow-building crossover drama. The third weekend added another $1.5 million domestically, a decline of roughly 56%, bringing the domestic total past $168 million. By June 18, the film stood at $167.9 million in North America. International reporting ranged from approximately $97.5 million to $102.3 million, creating the small difference between the major worldwide totals. Either figure placed the movie above $265 million globally and made it A24's biggest worldwide theatrical release to that point. Less than 2 weeks after opening, it had already passed the studio's previous worldwide leader, Marty Supreme. Profit cannot be calculated by subtracting $10 million from the box office. Theaters retain a significant portion of ticket sales. International revenue returns at different rates and the publicly reported production budget does not include the full marketing campaign. Those expenses were not disclosed in the available reporting. Even with those cautions, the commercial outcome is enormous. A worldwide gross more than 26 times the stated production cost gives the financiers considerable room to cover advertising, distribution and exhibitor shares while still producing a major return. Streaming rights, premium rentals, physical media, and possibly franchise development would sit into the theatrical gross. Yet, the largest impact may be institutional rather than financial. Backrooms proved that an online creator could bring a pre-existing visual language into theaters without sanding away everything that made it strange. It also strengthened a broader 2026 horror pattern alongside films such as Obsession and Iron Lung. Filmmakers who established audiences online could convert direct viewer relationships into a theatrical demand. The lesson for studios is tempting. Search YouTube for the next inexpensive phenomenon. The real lesson is harder. Parsons did not succeed merely because he had followers. He succeeded because audiences recognized authorship. They believed the feature would contain the same imagination that drew them to the shorts. Numbers this large change how a movie is discussed. Backrooms stopped being framed as a risky experiment by a 20-year-old and became evidence that a theatrical horror could emerge from internet culture, reject traditional development pipelines, and still outperform far more expensive properties. But commercial victory does not settle artistic debate. An opening a weekend measures anticipation. The weeks afterward measure satisfaction only imperfectly. Critics and audiences still had to decide whether Parsons had expanded his mysterious yellow cords or simply made them bigger. The critical surprise of Backrooms was not that reviewers admired its sets. Anyone who saw the trailers could tell the yellow labyrinth had been constructed with unusual care. The surprise was how many critics accepted the film's refusal to behave like a normal horror story. As of June 20, 2026, it holds an 89% Rotten Tomato score from 239 reviews with an average rating of 7.5 out of 10. Metacritic records a 77 from 44 critics, placing the response firmly in generally a favorable territory. Those area remarkable numbers for an abstract, slow-burning feature directed by a 20-year-old whose previous work lived primarily on YouTube. The praise kept returning to the same achievement, atmosphere sustained through restraint. Critics admired the way Kane Parsons weaponized negative space, fluorescent lighting, and architectural repetition without turning the movie into a continuous parade of creatures and jump scares. Rotten Tomatoes consensus calls the film an assured debut that converts the internet's liminal spaces into something both mesmerizing and frightening. Reviews from Roger.com/film similarly emphasize the communal tension of the theatrical experience, the strange pleasure of sitting among hundreds of people who are all searching the same empty doorway for movement. The film does not always frighten through events. It frightens through anticipation becoming exhausting. Production design, sound, and cinematography received the least divided admiration. Even negative reviews struggled to dismiss the physical world Parsons and his collaborators created. The maze appears simultaneously tangible and impossible. While its audio-visual texture gives a bland office architecture the force of a hostile organism. Critics praised the wide compositions, practical corridors, restrained visual effects, and the electrical soundscape that seems to vibrate beneath every scene. This agreement matters because it establishes Parsons as more than a creator with a marketable concept. The response recognized an actual visual author, someone capable of transferring a homemade digital language into a feature reel without losing its identity. Then the divide opens. The screenplay became the pressure point. William Labani's review offered thought-rap admired the production and design, but argued that the characters, psychology, and mythology never form a coherent dramatic whole. Other mixed reviews reached similar conclusions. The film is gripping whenever Parsons lets viewers wander through the environment. Weaker whenever dialogue tries to explain Clark's emotional condition or Mary's drama. That criticism cuts directly into the adaptation's central compromise. The original videos could remain fragments. A theatrical feature needed a narrative. Yet, the more structure the filmmakers added, the more some viewers felt the mystery shrinking beneath conventional character writing. That does not mean critics wanted more answers. Quite the opposite. Many of the strongest reviews celebrated the film for resisting definitive explanation. They appreciated that Sinks research never turns the Backrooms into a solved scientific phenomenon and that the finale preserves interpretive uncertainty. The frustration came from an awkward middle position. In psychology to invite close examination, but not always enough development to make every emotional conclusion convincing. Enough mythology to suggest a larger system, but not enough to satisfy viewers approaching the movie as a puzzle. The film asks to be felt and decoded simultaneously, depending on our patience. That tension is either its greatest strength or the point where the walls begin closing in. Audience response was warmer than hostile. Thought were noticeably less enthusiastic than the critics. Rotten Tomatoes currently lists a 74% verified audience score from more than 5,000 ratings. While opening night moviegoers gave it a cinema score. That is not rejection. For an ambiguous experimental horror film marketed as a major summer event, it indicates a sharp split between viewers who embraced the experience and enthusiasts who expected a more conventional payoff. Audience comments repeatedly praised the atmosphere, performances, and the faithfulness to Parsons' web series. Complaints focused on slow pacing, a limited character progression, unclear meaning, and an ending that supplied him more questions than closure. The distinction between fans and newcomers proved less predictable than expected. Existing followers enjoyed recognizing async, the found footage language, and the larger mythology, but some also resisted changes to Parsons' established canon. New viewers lacked that baggage. Yet, several felt the movie assumed a familiarity it had not earned. Others had discovered the shorts only after leaving the theater. That circular movement from YouTube to cinema and back to YouTube is culturally important. The feature did not replace its online source. It sent millions of people toward it, transforming the original videos into something between prequel, companion piece, and archaeological record. A stranger debate formed around Parsons himself. Sections of the online audience speculated that a 20-year-old could not truly have controlled a production this large, suggesting producer Oscar Perkins or more experienced crew members must have secretly directed substantial portions. No credible evidence supported that claim, and collaborators including Mark Duplass publicly defended Parsons' authorship. The suspicion exposes an uncomfortable industry bias. Hollywood celebrates young talent rhetorically, then struggles to believe that talent could exercise real authority. Parsons' age became part of the reception because viewers were not only evaluating the movie, they were evaluating whether its existence seemed possible. The film's commercial success pushed that conversation beyond horror fandom. Reporting on Backrooms and Cory Barker's obsession framed both movies as proof that digital creators can develop a craft and audience relationships outside traditional studios, then bring enthusiastic viewers into theaters. Executives began discussing online platforms not merely as marketing channels, but as public development laboratories where filmmakers refine ideas through direct audience response. That interpretation risks producing a wave of cynical, creepypasta acquisitions. Followers alone do not create cinematic identity. Parsons succeeded because years of online experimentation taught him exactly what his imagery could do. No meaningful long-term critical verdict can exist only 3 weeks after release, and the major awards cycle remains ahead. Still, the immediate cultural result is clear. Backrooms has already become a test case for internet-born cinema, praised as sensory filmmaking, criticized as incomplete drama, and debated as evidence of a generational shift in who gets to direct large-scale movies. The disagreement suits the film. Everyone enters the same rooms. Nobody agrees on what they contain. To understand why that ambiguity feels so powerful and why Clark seems almost relieved to disappear inside it, we finally have to confront the theme beneath the wallpaper. Full spoilers from this point onward. The Backrooms are not hell in the religious sense. They are something more disturbing. A purgatory humanity built for itself. Drop ceilings, synthetic carpet, fluorescent panels, and cheaply partitioned walls were created for efficiency, yet stripped of workers and a purpose. They become monuments to a spiritual exhaustion. Kane Parsons also described the concept as reacting to industrial monoculture. The way functional architecture increasingly separates people from environments the human nervous system evolved to inhabit. The film's Yellow Maze draws its true power from a simple but unsettling idea. It isn't an alien world invading our own. Instead, it is our world stripped of every illusion and excuse. Clark understands that emptiness because he has already been living with it. His furniture showroom creates the appearance of warmth and domestic comfort without ever feeling like a real home. Likewise, his pirate-themed commercials project confidence while hiding his humiliation and personal failures. The Backrooms present him with endless versions of that same reality, spaces that resemble human life but lack everything that gives life meaning. Rather than fearing the maze, Clark feels accepted by it. It transforms his disappointment into architecture. Every hallway suggests that progress is possible, yet none of them lead anywhere meaningful. That endless cycle reflects Clark's own life. For years, he has replayed the collapse of his career and marriage, constantly reshaping the story while always ending up trapped in the same emotional place. Memory ultimately becomes the film's greatest monster. The Backrooms seem capable of absorbing human experiences and recreating them imperfectly, producing furniture fused into walls, distorted living spaces, and motionless human-like figures that resemble memories worn down through endless repetition. By the film's conclusion, Mary's memories have also begun merging with the maze, her childhood bedroom, the async facility, and eventually a twisted version of Mary herself all appear within its endless corridors. These are never perfect copies because memory itself is never perfect. It preserves an impression of reality, then quietly reshapes that impression every time it is recalled. Clark mistakes these replicas for salvation. Surrounded by silent imitations including a figure that appears to resemble his estranged wife, he finally inhabits a version of family life where no one argues, challenges him, or leaves. He even consumes pieces of the creatures, creating a grotesque image of nostalgia feeding on itself. Clark doesn't want an accurate restoration of his past because true memory would force him to confront his own selfishness. Instead, he longs for a version he can control, one in which he remains the misunderstood victim. That is why Mary's final confrontation reaches him so deeply. She refuses to participate in his therapeutic fantasy and forces him to face the truth the maze has allowed him to avoid. His life didn't simply happen to him, his own decisions played a major role in destroying it. For one brief moment, Clark chooses reality. He frees Mary, but his realization comes too late. Captain Clark, the enormous, grotesquely distorted version of his furniture store mascot, kills him almost immediately. The symbolism is brutally precise. Clark is destroyed by the false identity he created to survive his commercial failures. The cheerful pirate mascot has transformed into a monstrous monument to denial. The Backrooms don't punish him with an unfamiliar monster, they amplify the persona he built until it becomes more powerful than the man beneath it. Clark spent years pretending to be someone else, only to enter a world where imitation becomes physically real. His mask doesn't simply follow him, it consumes him. Mary survives because her relationship with memory is fundamentally different. She carries a fragment of concrete from her demolished childhood home, an object that could easily symbolize the same nostalgic prison trapping Clark. Instead, she uses it as a weapon against Captain Clark. That single act defines the difference between remembering and retreating. Clark attempts to live inside a reconstructed past, while Mary takes a piece of her past and uses it to keep moving forward. Her trauma doesn't disappear, and the film never offers the comforting illusion that confronting pain brings instant healing. Instead, memory becomes something tangibly heavy, painful, and ultimately useful. She cannot return to the home she lost, but she can decide how its remains will shape her future. Then async appears, and even escape becomes another illusion. Mary reaches what seems to be a place of institutional safety, only to discover that Phil and his researchers understand very little about the dimension they have been studying. Their cameras, protective suits, and scientific terminology create the illusion of control. Yet the organization remains fundamentally ignorant. Async originally began as an MRI manufacturer, a company dedicated to revealing the hidden interior of the human body before turning its attention to an environment that may instead reveal the hidden interior of the human mind. The parallel is impossible to overlook. The organization can observe the phenomenon, classify it, and contain fragments of it, but genuine understanding remains beyond its reach. The film's finely made yet replicated version of Mary makes the ending far more disturbing than a simple sequel tease. Perhaps Async rescued the real Mary, or perhaps the interrogation room itself is just another imitation created by the maze. Either way, observation has become contamination. The Backrooms now possess Mary's memories, including those formed after her supposed escape. This suggests that the maze isn't bound by ordinary geography. Once someone enters it, the connection may continue no matter where they go. The maze doesn't simply replicate rooms, it learns the relationships between places, people, and their deepest fears, then reconstructs them as unsettling approximations. Every attempt to understand it only gives it more human experiences to imitate. There's an unmistakably modern interpretation here. The distorted bodies and corrupted environments resemble machine-generated images. Recognizable pieces assembled by a system capable of recreating appearances without truly understanding the meaning behind them. Many critics have compared the film's imagery to generative slop, while Kane Parsons deliberately leaves the metaphor open instead of turning the story into a straightforward commentary on technology. The underlying idea reaches much further. Whether the force behind the copying is memory, software, capitalism, or even cinema itself, replication without understanding creates something lifeless. A showroom is not a home. A therapeutic reenactment is not genuine healing. A human-shaped figure is not a human being. The film is less effective when it explains these ideas too explicitly. Mary's role as a therapist occasionally feels designed primarily to unlock Clark's psychology, while her own emotional journey doesn't receive the depth the ending seems to require. Likewise, Clark's transformation from curiosity to complete surrender moves so quickly that much of the emotional weight depends on the strength of the performance rather than the screenplay. Some viewers will find the film's ambiguous ending deeply thought-provoking, while others may see it as an intentional setup for future installments. Both interpretations are understandable. The screenplay doesn't always match the sophistication of the film's visual storytelling, and the maze itself often feels more psychologically convincing than the dialogue meant to explain it. Even so, Backrooms succeeds where it matters most. It transforms a viral internet image into a compelling cinematic language built on repetition, distorted familiarity, abandoned corporate spaces, and the unsettling fear of being remembered incorrectly. The film respects internet horror instead of dismissing it as disposable online culture, proving that large-scale filmmaking doesn't have to abandon the raw creativity that captured audiences in the first place. Parsons' feature-length debut is undeniably imperfect. At times, it's emotionally underwritten and occasionally too fascinated with its own mystery, yet it's also visually confident, deeply unsettling, and unmistakably the work of a filmmaker with a distinct artistic voice. Viewers looking for constant monster encounters, clear mythology, and neatly resolved answers may feel as though they've spent 2 hours wandering endless hallways without finding a single exit. But for audiences drawn to the work of David Lynch, analog horror, liminal spaces, and stories that continue evolving long after the credits roll, that unresolved journey is exactly the point. My verdict: 8 out of 10. The narrative doesn't always live up to the intelligence of its visuals, but its most powerful images linger like memories you can quite prove are your own. The backrooms are terrifying because they seem endless. Parsons understands something even more disturbing. Eventually, they may remember us better than we remember ourselves.